person in my life, Tupac, who helps to keep my head level. And I think you need somebody like this. And that's the way he brought it to me. Because Tupac had that attitude and that air, but when he came in my office, he was just being a nice young man, respectful. And I thought that Tupac was genius, but I also thought that Tupac was buck wild. And I thought Tupac felt he had something he needed to prove.
He got the tattoo Thug Life on him, and he called me, and he was very excited about it. He said, I want you to see this tattoo. So I saw the tattoo, and I said, what have you done?
To my brother, stay strong, keep your heads up. They know we fed up, but they just don't give a fuck.
He was now Tupac the Outlaw. With songs like the inflammatory I Don't Give a Fuck, Tupac's rage would prove contagious. When a Texas teenager shot a policeman, his lawyer blamed Tupac's music. Tupac was heading for trouble.
After a concert in Atlanta, I believe Tupac was driving a car and he was passing by an incident where these guys were roughing up another motorist. It turns out that the guys were off-duty police officers, and a gun battle between Tupac and these guys escalated.
To pull out guns on the police, that's striking to a lot of people, particularly now as black youth or the hip-hop generation is moving into this new mode of thinking as a result of what Death Row Records and other music groups are doing, which is this kind of gangster posture. Tupac became like the poster child for that, you know, the outlaw.
When Vice President Dan Quayle announced that Tupacalypse Now had no place in American society, Tupac's outlaw credentials were sealed.
People in black communities around the country thought he was a hero, man. They're like, damn, he shot back at the police, man. He shot at the po-po, you know what I mean? No one does that. No one does that.
He would start meeting real gangsters. A fortnight after the Atlanta shootout, two men would take Tupac to a New York nightclub, where he would become involved in an incident that would increase his notoriety. The incident began with a woman named Ayanna Jackson.
She performed oral sex for him on the dance floor. She went back to his hotel with him. A couple of days passed. She called wanting to see him again. And she then came back to the hotel.
They had consensual sex. He left the room and went to sleep in another room, and he left her with guys that she actually came with and didn't knew.
Tupac took me by the hand and led me to the bedroom. Just as we began kissing, the door opened and I heard people entering. As I started to turn to see who it was, Tupac grabbed my arm and said,
"Don't worry, baby. These are my brothers and they aren't going to hurt you. We do everything together."
This unsigned account was sent to Vibe magazine, accusing Tupac of having instigated the rape. Tupac protested his innocence, claiming he was too afraid of his gangster friends to stop them. He was charged with rape and sexual assault. Exactly what happened that night would become the subject of conjecture. On the night before Tupac was to appear in court, someone would try to kill him.
So that was the night that Tupac was in New York. He was supposed to be recording a rap for this artist named Little Sean, who was on at the time Uptown Records. I believe Puffy was going to be the producer. So a lot of people were in the studio that night. Andre Harrell was in the studio that night.
And I had been hanging out with Tupac that week because I wanted Tupac to do an episode of a television show called New York Undercover here. So they called me and they said that Tupac is coming down, and we want you to come down, Andre. So I said, all right. So I got there. We're on one floor, Little Sean, and Biggie Smalls on another floor.
When Tupac arrived at the studio, a gang of armed assailants approached and shot him 5 times.
Tupac comes off the elevator, and he's upset, and I'm looking at him, like, trying to figure out what's the matter. And he said, then I look at his head, and he's bleeding. And then he said, he just got shot. So he's taking off his coat, and he's looking around like, who did this? And I'm like, I'm standing in the front, almost like, when he gets on, I'm like right there, and I'm trying to, you know, calm him down. And then I realized, oh, my man is in shock right now. He just got shot.
Tupac was rushed to hospital, but the following morning he appeared in court to face his rape charges.
I said, Tupac, get up, get out of that bed, get up to that courtroom, so if that jury come out, you want the jury to see that you don't disrespect them. Because the main reason they shot you or whatever was to keep you from showing up.
Let me line him up. Let me line his feet up.
He knew who was there at the hotel scene where the raping took place. And there were some people who were part of that situation who were like really known in the streets as really being notorious bad guys. So I thought that maybe the incident might have had something to do with what Tupac potentially could say to defend himself, to say that he didn't do it and maybe somebody else did the raping. And I thought that was like a message to say, before you think about doing that, you better do this. And I think he knew that, but I don't think at that point he was prepared to address that beef with that particular group of folks, because that particular group of folks, they weren't about records, they were about beefs.
Tupac Shakur was convicted of a third-degree felony, which in many respects is a very minor crime in New York. He was not convicted of rape, as some people say. He was not even convicted of any kind of sexual assault. It was a third-degree offense. And the judge gave him what I thought was an outrageous sentence for that. He was scheduled to spend from 1.5 years to 4.5 years in prison.
The court ruled that Tupac had played at least a minor role in the rape of Ayanna Jackson. He had forcibly touched her buttocks. Tupac was sent to a maximum security prison, and when the charges against his gangster friends were dismissed, the press wondered whether Tupac had been set up for having shot 2 policemen in Atlanta.
I look guilty.
Tupac, are you guilty?
Hell no. I look guilty to you.
You said you're not guilty, Tupac?
Everyone's not guilty.
You know what's interesting to me about the whole Ayanna Jackson thing is the fact that Tupac went to trial, you know what I'm saying? The other 2 guys didn't. Tupac had his lawyer, Michael Warren, you know, who's here in New York City in Brooklyn, great lawyer, brilliant lawyer. And the other 2 guys got some other lawyers, you know, Police Benevolent Association lawyers. And what I say to people, whatever happened to the other 2 guys? Whatever happened to those cases? Don't know, man. I have no idea.
I look guilty.
While Tupac was in prison, Interscope released his 3rd album. Me Against the World went platinum on the strength of the single, Dear Mama.
What Pac brought to hip-hop that I think that really changed the game is that he made it acceptable to rhyme about emotions. He made it acceptable to rhyme about women. He made it acceptable to rhyme about his mother. He made it acceptable to rhyme towards females. You have thugs and so-called killers and so forth all rhyming pre-pop about how tough and how they shoot up everyone and so forth, but yet they could never, no one could ever tell you how they felt about their mother.
He was in prison, but he was coming to terms with his past. Tupac told a journalist that when he was in hospital, he had a dream. He saw himself as an old man. But it wasn't a dream. The man he saw was someone he'd been told was dead, his father.
I told him, and I said that I am with you and I'm your father. And I held his hand and touched him. But that was the first time I'd seen Tupac in about 15 years. It was a good feeling. And the first time I drove, I went by myself. It cost me $200. I got a speeding ticket. I couldn't wait to get up to prison to see my son for the first time. You know, again, to talk to him consciously. But they were very hard because I knew that my son at 3 o'clock every day would be put in a cage, 6 by 9. And to know that you, a part of you, is locked in a prison cell for something that he did not do was a very hardened experience, and it really bothered me. He kind of felt that he was losing it.